Hello everyone. I have made very few total drama videos on this channel, and the last time I did was like 5 or so years ago, until I fell out of the fandom for a while, but nostalgia is bringing me back, and I'm currently going through a rewatch of the entire franchise. The purpose of this video is to rank the cast as players, like if this was a real reality show, a la Survivor or Big Brother. Since I am treating this like a reality show, I'm going to talk about each cast member and 4 elements to rank them as players: strategy, social ability, challenges, and luck. I'm going to start from the bottom and work up to the top. So, in last place is Noah. I was debating about whether to make him or the next person last place, but I decided Noah for a few reasons. When it comes to strategy, Noah had no strategy. He went out of his way to make himself a target by not only refusing to participate, but making sarcastic comments and not improving team morale. This is the main reason why I have him as last. Socially, he had no friends whatsoever on the team. He made Heather safe of all people, and there was no convenience or contrivances needed to keep herself safe, which says a lot. There's nothing notable to discuss about his challenge ability, and he had no luck on his side or against him, so he is at 22. So 21st place, the other person who never made it through a single vote in Ezekiel. There is no strategy whatsoever with Ezekiel. If he had any strategic sense, he would have shut up, since he was not even looked at as a target before his comment, and he would have been safe. Socially, he was awful, since he pissed off all the women by making sexist comments, and the guys obviously did not rally behind him, because it just wasn't a good look, and they didn't agree with his sentiments either. In the one challenge he did perform in, he was solid in the challenge, but there's not enough to say if he's good in challenges or not. He definitely did not benefit from luck whatsoever. In general, there's nothing good to say about Ezekiel's game. I only put him above Noah since he didn't actively go out of his way to sabotage himself in the way that Noah did, and actually put effort, unlike Noah. So in 20th is Eva. She's the second last person that I'm going to put in the bottom tier / abysmal tier as a player. So she's higher than the other two because at least she made it through a vote. Strategically, it seemed like they only thought about winning challenges and nothing else. No alliances, no social planning, nothing. But the fact that she just wanted to win challenges at least showed some thought. Her social skills were non-existent, obviously. She just lashed out and threatened people to get what she wants, which we saw in not only the Marriage Challenge, but in her first boot episode as well, without any sort of foresight. She had no friends and only survived one vote, and that was because Ezekiel was sexist. Regarding the challenges, she did pretty good in the small pool that we got to see of her in challenges. She was second in the Marriage Challenge, and I believe she was in the final 4 or the final 5 in the Sleeping Challenge. She did well in the few challenges she competed in. When it comes to luck, she did have luck on her side. Not only was she brought back to begin with, unlike many of the others, but the producer specifically chose her to come back for some drama. So even despite being gone for several votes, she couldn't even go under the radar to escape being the marriage boot. So she had luck, but she outright blew it. The final person to go in my abysmal bottom tier is Tyler at 19th. I don't know if I'm going to get flack for putting him below some others, but when I explain it, I believe it will make sense. So strategically, he had none whatsoever. He was more focused on Lindsay than building any sort of rapport or relationship with anyone on his own team. He was an isolated target from almost the very beginning, and was lucky that they had a slight winning streak in episode 4 to 5, otherwise he would have been gone in those episodes. Socially, the only person that liked him was Lindsay, as I mentioned earlier, and it brought a target on him because she was on the other tribe. A few of his teammates outright mocked him once he is booted, so it showed that they never liked him or respected him to begin with. He made himself a target by getting in a showmance with someone on the opposite team so early in the game. With challenges, he outright sucked in them. That was kind of his entire gimmick, so it's not shocking that he would perform poorly. When it comes to luck, I do believe he did benefit from some luck. He was most targeted and hated on his team in the Dodgeball and the Talent Show episodes, which were in episodes 4 and 5, and those just so happened to be the episodes that the Killbrass won the challenge. If it wasn't for that, he would have been the third or fourth boot for sure. Katie and Sadie conveniently getting lost also caused him to be overlooked for that round, but even then, I believe he was in the bottom 3, so he wasn't off the target yet. While he was unlucky in his final episode, since he did accomplish his fear a few times but it didn't count, his social and strategic game was in shambles way before this, so it was kind of hard to feel bad for him when he eventually got booted. So this next tier is called the bad tier, and at 18th is Izzy. So she had no strategy or rational thought, at all. Though I will say that she somewhat aligned with Heather as a number during the merge, but otherwise there's no strategy to think of. She was terrible socially. She was only able to make friends with Lindsay and Owen. Everyone thought that she was too crazy and was virtually very annoyed with her. She was always an easy choice to boot, and it caused her to be booted in the third vote on the Go First and in the fourth merge vote. She did okay in some of the team challenges, but did awful in some others. She was okay in some of the early merge challenges and didn't compete in the others, like the bike challenge, because she was so crazy. Overall, she was mediocre at best in challenges. When it comes to luck, I am docking her because she was lucky. She was lucky to even be chosen to come back by the producers in the merge to begin with. And even then, she benefited from there being 2 automatic eliminations in the mid-merge with Lindsay and DJ. Otherwise, there was a chance that she would have gotten booted earlier. So at 17th, I have Katie. I don't know if I'm going to get flack for putting her higher than the 2 that are below her, but she didn't benefit from luck like Izzy. She wasn't a constant target like Tyler was. So obviously she had no strategy at all outside of ing with Sadie and gooing gagaing over Justin. Socially, she was obviously very close with Sadie, but there are a few background scenes of her getting along with people like Courtney and DJ. At the same time, it says a lot that she was booted over Sadie, who didn't have the conventional look or athleticism as Katie did, and who was also dorkier than her in general. So regarding challenges, she did well in the dodgeball challenge, but completely tanked the wedge challenge. If it wasn't for that, I'm pretty sure she would have made it further. There's nothing else to say about her in challenges overall. When it comes to luck, she didn't benefit from or had poor luck. So in general, she was just there. She didn't screw up as much as the others below her, but she also didn't have the luck that some of them did either. So at 16th place, I have Sadie, because she simply made it further. She had no strategy. I will say though that it was smart for her to go under the radar after Katie was booted, as it caused for her to not be targeted over the likes of Tyler. In general, she didn't make any alliances or much friends to advance herself or her positioning in the game. Socially, she spent most of her time with Katie, and then with Harold when Katie was booted. The fact that she did hang out with Harold wasn't the best because he was on the outs. Either way, she remained on the outs for her entire duration on the show. She was an easy boot, and she didn't seem to like her team either. From what I recall in the challenges, Sadie did really poorly. Outside of getting lost in the woods, she did poorly in the dodgeball challenge, was horrible in her final challenge as well. She did decently in some other challenges, but that's it. Decent. She was lucky she wasn't booted over Katie, when she easily could have been booted instead in that place. At 15th place, I have Harold. Strategically, Everything he did was in self-defense and self-preservation. He rigged the votes to save himself, which shows that he will figure out a way to fight to stay, but it was because he knew he was going home. He never really took action in the game to position himself better. Socially, he was horrendous. While it did seem like he got along with the likes of Bridgette and Sadie, as well as sometimes getting along with DJ and Geoff, almost everyone was annoyed with him for most of his stay, and he was always expendable. Duncan, Geoff, and DJ bullied him, and most people did not feel sorry for him. He never used the few social bonds he had to his advantage. In challenges, he was pretty good at them. As we all know, he thrived in the dodgeball and talent show challenges, performed his fear in the fear challenge, and did well in the paintball challenge and the trust challenge. And even in the cooking challenge, he did well, despite being harassed the entire episode. He did have a weak moment in his final episode because of you know what. He definitely did benefit a lot from having luck on his side, which is where I had to dock him several points. Eva made King a huge target of herself in the second episode, caused himself to make it through the second boot. Sadie screwing up caused him to avoid being booted over her, and he had to rake the votes to last another episode. He benefited from a lot of luck, or else he would have been booted a lot earlier. He barely made it through several votes. There was just nothing good about his game other than self-preservation, luck, and being good at challenges. At 14th place, Courtney rounds out as the last person I'm putting on the outright bad tier. It seemed like her only strategy was her becoming a leader, but at least she knew that it was a competition and wanted to play it competitively, so I give her props on that. She was about following the rules. Socially, she was not great at all. She rubbed people the wrong way with her CIT rants and was bossy without having a lot of stuff to back that bossiness up. On the other side, she was able to befriend Bridgette, warmed up to Duncan enough so he would protect her with his allies, and she somehow became friends with Leshawna. Overall, she's a mixed bag in the social department. When it comes to challenges, I don't remember her doing all that well in them. She did do poorly in the fear challenge, but she did well in the final military challenge and the cooking challenge. In general, she was very mediocre all around, though you could tell that she was skilled in some senses. When it comes to luck, Courtney needed a lot of luck. If Ezekiel did not go on his sexist rant, she's the first boot, no doubt. She blew the fear challenge more than anyone else and barely made it over Taylor. For someone who was a leader, she was in danger quite a bit. At the same time, she would have made it further if she was not rigged out. But at the same time, in the hot capture episode, everyone felt like she wasn't robbed, and Lindsay outright told her that she would have been booted soon anyways. So it showed that no one really liked her, and she was on borrowed time, even if she wasn't rigged out. So this next tier I'm calling the unlucky/potential tier. These are 3 people who went home earlier in the season, but it had more to do with plot contrivances/plot armor instead of these 3 actively making mistakes, socially, challenges, strategically, otherwise, that would have sent them home. So the first person on this list is Justin at 13th. Strategically, we do get a slight hint of a strategic side, as he painted his eyeballs with paint so he could sleep but appear awake in the sleeping challenge. He uses his looks to woo over the women, Owen, and the sharks in the first episode, so he knows what he has and he uses it to better his positioning. Socially, he did not speak, but he was in a position where he didn't need to speak. All of the women loved him and wanted to keep him around due to his looks, and even some of the guys were impressed as well. He literally pissed off nobody. When it comes to challenges, Justin actually did well in his final challenge with his tease show, and did well in the first challenge, but it was mainly due to his looks. When it comes to luck, he was actually very unlucky. Justin did nothing wrong socially, strategically, or challenge-wise. He was booted to make Heather look more strategic, since he was threatening, but the votes count based on how many people are left, with there being 10 screaming gophers left, actually doesn't make much sense at all, making his elimination very contrived, hence me putting him here. So at 12th place, I have Beth. Strategically, she got into an alliance with Heather, which was smart. She knew when to back away from that alliance, showing that she was able to pivot and gotten good with the other side of the Gophers. She didn't let Heather turn on her and boot her before Beth had to realize that she was bad, unlike Lindsay. Socially, she actually wasn't bad. Lindsay was targeted over her in the beginning, and she was able to bond with Lindsay, Cody, and Leshawna. She manages to get in the good graces of her team and pivoted well. She showed in her short time that she was able to be adaptable socially, which is a huge strength. When it comes to challenges, I don't really remember her doing well in any particular challenge, outside of the fear challenge. She's mediocre overall in this sense, as I don't remember her outright bombing in challenges, outside of the paintball one, for obvious reasons. When it comes to luck, she was unlucky. She did not know that taking an artifact from Boney Island would cause a curse, and if it wasn't brought up after the cooking challenge, she would have lasted a longer. Beth was booted from little of her own doing, and it was because they needed plot armor to keep Heather around more. When it comes to the whole Boney Island situation, she wasn't present when Chris announced that the island was cursed, and when she came back, she asked if she missed anything, and she wasn't told that she did miss anything, so she was booted due to plot convenience. The final person to take up this tier at 11th, which is technically the top half, is Cody, and it was mainly due to his elimination being the most contrived in the entire season, and it had nothing to do with anything he did wrong. So, he had no strategy in mind whatsoever, so that aspect I'm just going to move on from. Socially, everyone got along with him, and no one was mad at him. Even the people who he annoyed, like Gwen and Trent, he was able to get them on his side, so showing that he's actually pretty good socially, and he can change people's opinions on him. In challenges, he was very mediocre overall. The only stand-up performance I remember him having was in the dodgeball challenge. He was actually very unlucky. He got randomly eliminated and randomly attacked by a bear, and it was used to boot him via a vote. It was done to spare Heather from being an early boot. He really did nothing wrong and would have lasted a lot longer if this was a natural game. Plot contrivances like this takes away points from Heather and makes me gain points for others who were booted relatively early, like Cody. So overall, this wraps up my potential/unlucky tier. So this next tier is what I would like to call the mediocre tier. Out of the 10 people who merged without returning, Lindsay definitely played the worst in my eyes. Strategically, she got into an alliance with Heather and blindlessly followed her, even when Lindsay didn't even like her. Lindsay made poor strategic moves, like voting out Beth twice, someone who was always in her corner and someone who would have looked out for her like she should have. Socially, she was seen as nice, but dumb. And she was an affiliate of Heather, so even that put a taint on her. If you actually look into it, she was targeted quite often in the beginning of the season, even over Heather. And some are very shocked with how dumb she could be, as it just annoyed people. When she was her own person, which was very rare, she could get along with others, which we saw in the cooking challenge, as she got along with Leshawna and Gwen. When it comes to challenges, she was actually pretty good to decent at a lot of them, and could have won the challenge in her final episode. Her dumbness does get in the way in some of her wins though, like the trust challenge. She did dominate the extreme torture challenge and won for her team, so there is good things there. When it comes to luck, she did benefit from luck. There were bigger targets than her that appeared in the beginning, causing her to be safe, but it wasn't due to anything she did. Like Noah just screwed himself over in the dodgeball episode, where she would have gone home otherwise, and Izzy being a complete loco in the Bonnie Island episode, where Lindsay would have gone otherwise, had Izzy just toned it down. She was unlucky with how her boot episode went, because Duncan and Owen didn't even complete the challenge, and Leshawna and Izzy didn't even partake in it, but she was automatically eliminated. Overall, Lindsay was very mediocre, but there are definitely a lot of flaws in her gameplay. So at 9th place is Trent. I find him so hard to talk about because he is the blatant example of a satellite love interest, as everything he does revolves around Gwen and nothing on his own. When it comes to strategy, there is no strategy talked about or hinted whatsoever. I have no idea what his game insight was at all throughout any point in the season. Socially, he didn't even really socialize with the others much, and didn't plan on just being nice, or being the nice guy to advance himself in the game. People didn't dislike him, but people never really spoke about him much outside of Gwen either way. He somewhat flirted with Lindsay, was able to get along with the likes of Owen, Cody, and the Calabas males, so he was somewhat likable. But his likability was never brought up as a positive or a negative as a player at all. When it comes to challenges, he was actually a pretty poor performer, to be honest, outside of the talent show and the sleeping challenge. He didn't really face his fear in the fear challenge, wasn't great in the Bonnie Island challenge, flopped in the cooking challenge, the trust challenge, and the extreme torture challenges. He was mediocre to poor in general. When it comes to luck, I don't think he benefited from luck at all. His boot, while contrived, wasn't unlucky. He wasn't lucky or unlucky regarding his gameplay either way. He's just very mediocre. This next tier is what I personally called the solid player tier. I'm pretty sure I might get some flack for putting her this low, but Heather is 8th for me. And some of it I've already described throughout the video. So strategically, she knew from the very beginning that she needed to make allies. First with Beth and Lindsay, then she worked with Izzy throughout the early merge, and then with Duncan and Owen to an extent in the late merge. She did help sabotage the Killer Bass in episode 3, so generally she's very adaptable and knows what she needs to do strategically. At the same time, a lot of the moves that she did make had no strategic benefit whatsoever, like reading Gwen's diary, kissing Trent, so on and so forth. Socially, she's terrible. Everyone knew that she was awful from the very beginning, around the time of episode 4 to episode 5, and most of her moves were not strategic at all, but because she was just a bitch. The diary talent show, taunting others, demanding Lindsay and Beth to not compete in the paintball challenge to cater to her, bossing people around in episode 10, the stunts she pulled in episodes 5, 16, and 19, so on and so forth. It put her in trouble several times throughout this season. So in the challenge department, when she tries, she is good at challenges. Sometimes her bossiness / efforts helps cause her team to lose, and she does have the most wins amongst the merge cast, though some of them are uber convenient and are based on luck, like the hide and seek challenge and the treasure chest challenge. When it comes to luck, she needed a lot for her game to prosper in general. She has to bribe some people to get Justin booted over herself, and I've already discussed how some of the votes are kind of iffy. Cody has to get injured for her to be spared in that episode. Beth has to be cursed for her to survive that episode. She has to win several merge challenges for her to not get booted, and some automatic elimination episodes happen around the early to mid-merge, where all she does need to do is to not get last. The Play the Losers episode also has quicks tricking everyone into not booting her. So overall, Heather, while a solid player, is very overrated. So at 7th place, I have Bridgette. From what I recall, her strategy was that she just wanted to be nice to everyone and to get people to work together. It seems like something she actively tried to do, which we saw in the gender episode, and she also kind of utilized this in the Killer Bass. At the same time, she didn't realize how others perceived her to be a threat, and she didn't have the best killer instinct to really take charge of the game and to make it to that tough point in the merge. Socially is her biggest strength. Her social skills are her biggest strength, that's what I mean. The only person that disliked her was Eva, because she was the final Killer Bass around when she returned, and Duncan, who saw her as a threat. Essentially, everyone in the Killer Bass liked her, just by her social skills, and she reached out to outsiders, which a lot of others didn't do. She was taken out because she was a great social player. One flaw that I do have with her is that she should have used more of her social skills for alliances and strategy. When it comes to challenges, she was actually quite mediocre in that element. She actively screwed up in the early challenges, like the Fear Challenge, the Woods Challenge, and the Talent Show Challenge. Though she was a stronger performer in the later pre-merge challenges, like the Cooking Challenge, the Trust Challenge, and the Paintball Challenge. There is nothing notable about her post-merge challenge performance. When it comes to luck, I do think she somewhat benefited from luck. There are bigger targets in Tyler and Courtney in that boot, though you could just say that her social skills caused her to be able to avoid that target. She was lucky in the Woods Challenge that Katie and Sadie blew it more than she did in the Camping Challenge, and she was lucky that her team won the talent show competition episode. But you could say in the Katie boot episode that her social skills avoided her being a target there. So a lot of her luck could be turned into a positive thing. So the final person taking up the solid tier is Bridgette's lover herself, Geoff, at 6th. So he didn't have any strategy that was mentioned or thought of whatsoever. He just joined a clique with Duncan and DJ and rode it out throughout the entire season. He was pushed into a guys alliance, then betrayed the guys alliance, and was tossed out of that guys alliance while not seeing it coming. Everything falls apart for him game-wise after Bridgette is booted. But to be fair, his cliquey group worked for him throughout most of the season. So like Bridgette, his social skills is his main strength. Everyone in the cast likes him, and he can gel with different types of people, making others warm up to him. Despite his cliquey/bullying antics, he is never really held accountable for it by people like Harold. He was in a position of power for a majority of the game, until he wasn't, and then people realized that he was too likable, so he was seen as a threat, which he didn't see coming. Essentially, he has the same strengths and weaknesses as Bridgette, but he lasted a bit longer. When it comes to challenges, he was mediocre at best, especially at the merge. He was a solid competitor on the Killer Bass, as he led them to victory a few times in the Cooking Challenge, and he contributed to some of their other wins, and did well even in the challenges they lost, like the Military Challenge. When it comes to luck, this might be iffy, but I do think that he might have been booted earlier if the next two boots, like the Lindsay and DG boots, post Bridgette, weren't automatic eliminations. If they were normal vote episodes right after Bridgette was booted, I do think that there's a chance that he gets booted around here. So DJ is one of the two people that I have in the good tier. I do think that he played a very similar game to Geoff, but I think the difference between the two is that 1, DJ wasn't targeted like Geoff was. 2, DJ didn't screw up like Geoff did. And 3, DJ was less of a bully than Geoff was. And 4, DJ wasn't distracted by assurance like Geoff. So strategically, DJ had no strategy. He just did whatever Duncan wanted him to do, which kind of worked for him because it seemed like Duncan actually respected him. All he had to do was be nice to people. Socially, he was the only person on the cast that no one was annoyed by or disliked at all, which even included Heather. Everyone hugged him when he was booted, and he was booted due to a non-elimination challenge, because the chances of him being booted via vote was very slim, so the writers had to find a way to get rid of him. So when it comes to challenges, he didn't do the first challenge, and he lost the Trust Challenge for the team, but his social skills was able to save him from being booted over Harold and Sadie. Sorry, I meant targeted over Harold. In general, he was a strong performer for the Killer Bass, as he did win the Boney Island Challenge for them and helped them in other challenges. He started to perform pretty poorly once the merge happened, and it caused him to get booted. I do remember him doing well as a deer during the paintball challenge, so that helped them win that challenge. When it comes to luck, he kinda did benefit from people being annoyed with others more during the episodes where his losses played a part in his team losing. So, like in the first challenge, his loss was completely forgotten over the likes of Courtney being annoying and losing the challenge, and Ezekiel and his sexist comments. And I already mentioned how he benefited from Harold and Sadie being bigger targets than he was in the episode Sadie is booted. So I have Owen, who is commonly referred to as the winner, as 4th place and in the good territory. So he had no strategy whatsoever, and to be fair, he didn't need it in the pre-merge. He aligned with the guys, mainly Duncan, after the merge, which was beneficial for him. He was never seen as a threat despite his popularity, unlike Geoff. Socially, he was seen as generally nice and friendly. He doesn't really rely on it to do anything, though it causes people to see him as harmless and not a threat. It caused most of the cast to help him out over Gwen in the finale, which does help him win, so his social skills helped him win. There are times where his gross antics did get people to be annoyed with him, but it was never anything that serious. In challenges, I do think he is a mediocre competitor. Overall, he was not a hindrance or a dominance in either direction, though he has his moments of doing well, like the dodgeball and the capping challenges, and poorly, like the cooking and the Are We There Yeti challenges. When it comes to luck, I do think he somewhat benefited from luck. One, no one saw him as a threat despite his popularity, and this was at the time where everyone thought that there was going to be a jury vote. He lost the cooking challenge in episode 10, but no one cared due to Beth's curse and Heather pissing everyone off. Again, you might say that his social strengths might have caused all of this to be overshadowed. He lost the challenge in episode 24, and Chef chose to boot Duncan over Owen. That was a huge benefit of luck. Overall, he was good, but I don't think he's great because he didn't really use any of it to his advantage. So this final tier is called the Great Tier, and at 3rd is Leshawna. So strategy was not much of a focus for her. She got into an alliance with Gwen and Bridgette at the merge and recruited Beth beforehand, but she's never been that much of a strategist. Socially, that is her biggest strength in the first season. Her social skills. Everyone liked her to the point where no one wanted to eliminate her when she finally got the boot and was rooting for her to win. Leshawna was often the mother/sister bear to most of the cast and was never seen as a threat by anyone within the cast as the game was going on. Like I mentioned earlier, she's great at recruiting people, like Beth in the pre-merge and Bridgette in the merge. So she used her social skills to her advantage. When it comes to challenges, she won the first few merge challenges, gaining invincibility, and had the 3rd most individual wins throughout the season. When it comes to the team's portion, she was mediocre at that portion, but got better throughout the last few episodes as a gopher. Though I will admit that she technically played a part in them losing the paintball challenge, but no one on the tribe cared about it. When it comes to luck, I don't really recall her having to rely much on luck to thrive in the season. If anything, she was unlucky through the season, unlike some others. I already mentioned her boot episode, where the others were tricked into voting for her, so she was rigged out of the season. And if that didn't happen, there's a chance she makes it a lot further. I will say that she might have been targeted if Lindsay and DJ's boots were a natural vote, as she lost numbers after the Bridgette boot, and the guys were targeting Big Threat. But even then, that's still a reach. So at 2nd, I have Duncan. He's the 2nd most strategic person from the cast. The first is Heather, but unlike her, he didn't need to rely on a bunch of contrivances and plot armor to get him far. He had two solid allies in DJ and Geoff, where their better social connections helped him control the killer bass. He decided to form a guys alliance with the two mentioned and Owen to get rid of the person who was closest to them in Bridgette and was the biggest threat to him personally. He then pivots to align with Heather when that goes well and uses her and Owen in the late merge. I assume this happens because he knows that those two are the most unlikable out of the cast, and getting rid of the more likable people makes sense. I do question his choice of targeting Geoff over Gwen and Leshawna in the final six, since that's a strong duo in that won't break up in that late portion of the game, and Leshawna being more likable than Geoff. I do find that to be a bit questionable. Socially, he can be good, but he also can be bad. He has the ability to make really good friends with people, mainly the guys, who will remain loyal to him. At the same time, his abrasive personality does rub people the wrong way, like Harold and some of the girls, but he always mentions that he's honest, so it kind of works out in his favor anyways. When it comes to challenges, Duncan was a pretty good competitor. He helped Killer Bass in some challenges and came close to winning some challenges on his own and as a part of the team. I don't recall him ever doing badly in a challenge this season. When it comes to luck, the only element of luck that I can recall is the Bridgette vote, especially since the vote made no sense and it was a convoluted way to get rid of her, since the narrative made no sense. Geoff doesn't vote her out, and the story mentions that over and over again, even Duncan using that as the reason to boot Bridgette, but no one knows where that fourth vote came from. That would have saved Duncan in that final 10 vote. So I was, and still kinda am, going back and forth as to who I put as first, but for now I decided to go with Gwen. So strategically, she did go out of her way to make an alliance with Bridgette and Leshawna, and approaches Owen to defeat Heather in the final 3. Nothing else really came up regarding her strategy. Socially, she was a very mixed bag. A lot of people do like, support, and feel bad for her at various points throughout the season, but her intrapersonal and judgmental personality does turn people off. Her social flaws plays a factor as to why she ends up losing against Owen in the finale. When it comes to challenges, she's actually very strong in challenges, whether in a team format or an individual format. She contributes to many of the Gophers' success and won some individual merge challenges as well. If I remember correctly, she won the most challenges in the entire season. When it came to luck, she never needed or benefited from luck to get out of some sticky jams. She was never really targeted throughout the entire season. The few times she was in the bottom 2 were contrived. In the final 7, she won the immunity challenge, but was in the bottom 2 with Izzy for some odd reason. In the final 6, she's in the bottom 2 with Geoff, but we know that 3 people voted off Geoff, Leshawna and Gwen voted out Heather, and Geoff voting out Gwen in this episode makes no sense, especially with what we were told throughout the episode. Overall, she played a very strong season, and while I might go back and forth with her and Duncan as being number 1 and number 2, for now, I feel started with putting her as first. Alright, so this is my tier list / ranking of how I feel these characters are as players within the context of Total Drama Island, and I feel very good about it. I will be doing this for every season of the franchise, and then I will do a similar ranking of all of the players put together. So, thank you all for watching and listening, and I will see you guys soon.